Nancy, I'd love it if you'd kick us off. I mean, a little bit of background and intro on you. I know a lot of folks know you, and I've definitely enjoyed getting to know you as well. But really, kind of since you've come on board and taken over, give us that background picture of where you came from and where we're going here.
Sounds good. Yep. And again, good. Thanks for having me. So yeah, just on me, a little bit of background. I started way back at a company that was called M&I Data Services. Some of you guys probably remember that, which was one of the first bank outsourcers. Started out of college, actually in college as an intern. Had a number of different roles there. Kind of built out their digital banking and online bill payment way back in the day. Then we became Metavante.
Mhm.
I left so I was there about 17 years, and I left for about 7 years. I did go to a company called Wausau Financial, which some of you may remember from the old Check 21 days.
I think I was a Wausau customer back in the day.
Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, led that for about 3.5, 4 years. Ended up going back to Metavante about we'll call it 8 months before we sold to FIS. Ended up running their payments or a good chunk of their payments business, and then I was their chief product officer. And then I went for about 4 years to a company called Core-Logic, which some of you guys might know as well in the mortgage space. Ran their largest business, and then most recently was at a company called Transact Campus. So pretty much my first step outside of fintech, which was a company that really serviced higher education campuses, all the big universities down to community colleges, software for payments and mobile credentials and dining. And then I got a call from Frank Martiri, who, I knew from Metavante days, although he kind of took over when I was at Wausau. But on this opportunity, I just really saw, the company as in a position to really, really differentiate for community banks. Community banks has always been kind of something I've been passionate about. I knew a lot of the people at the company already, because some of them, we had worked together at Metavante or M&A Data or FIS. So super excited. 6 months in. I probably spent the last 6 months more on the road than not on the road, which would be expected. Really just talking to clients and listening and understanding, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? How do they see the market? What are their challenges? Spending time with employees, of course, as well. And that's kind of fed us to a few different things. One, really defining a strategy that's aligned to the clients and ensuring that our roadmap's driven by our clients. We brought in Michelle Jacobs, who I think you guys met. He was at your event, and hopefully you enjoyed meeting him, but really to start to drive that kind of client input, market strategy, and drive it into how we're investing and where we're investing in our products. We obviously bought Aperture during this time, which was a great fit for us. We felt like we needed to beef up our digital, especially on the small business, commercial side, and bring that to clients because that's critical to them. So we've aligned, and I'll get into it on strategy around a few different main areas that I think are more transformative for community banks because I think, look, there's a pretty common thread that community banks are concerned. They need to be relevant. They need to differentiate. And to do that, they need products like the technology that can differentiate. I think, CSI has always been known as strong relationship service, and that's still foundational, and we need to continue that. But we need to step up kind of, our innovation against those key pieces that community banks need. They're in the toughest competitive market. You guys know that from regulatory stuff to the super regionals and regionals and what they have and can bring to market to Gen Z changes, AI, everything there. And so for me, I've always been very client driven, like understand, what are their challenges and everything we do should kind of align to that. We had a lot of banks last week in Nashville, some of our largest banks, and it was awesome. Like we just wanted to acid test. So here's what we heard, here's where we're going, here's what we're investing in. There was tremendous kind of consistency there. So I feel good that we've got the right strategy and now we're going about, kind of executing on it. And then there's been some organizational changes, which I can get into as well to kind of support all that. But that's been a lot of the focus.
That's great. I think really been interesting for me, Nancy, to just watch because, like you, in former lives, I've partnered with CSI. I've got friends over there and friends that have gone right over there in more recent years, and kind of watching the internal shift has been really interesting because I don't know. I think everybody would feel this, and certainly CSI's customers. It's not like anything was wrong at CSI, right? But
Right, right.
there's kind of something wrong in our whole industry, right? Or there's a storm on the horizon, put it that way, right? And so I
Yep.
think getting
Yep.
ahead of that change is something that I wouldn't have pointed a finger at CSI and said you need to change, but watching everything you're doing, it's like, wow. I think you guys are getting ahead of a lot of things that are coming. And one of the ones, in conversations with Michelle, so much focus on the business side commercial customers. And I think for community
Yep.
banking, I mean, we all know that's paramount and always has been, but we're starting to see some of that kind of fintech challenger crowd. They've done a
Yep.
heck of a number on us on the consumer side. It would, probably tougher on a credit union than the average community bank, but it's a scary proof point. Now they're definitely coming on the business side, be that Stripe or
Yep.
Affirm or all these other things, right? That are stacking up.
Yeah.
And so kind of that life cycle of business is more and more important.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the kind of fintech disruptors is the one I left out of all these different things, right? Coming at community banks. And so, yeah, I mean, we've kind of zeroed in on a few different key areas. One is commercial and small business, just improving, real-time deposits, visibility for their customers, lending, all of those pieces. And we're looking at it from the lens of, are we going to buy, build, or partner? But we've zeroed in pretty well. I think we'll make some decisions here shortly and start to execute in 2026. The other is just kind of data-driven digital, meaning, we've got really good digital, especially with the Aperture acquisition, but it's not about transactions anymore. It's about how do you use data, kind of go personalize the experience, drive the right, decisions for businesses and input and all of that. And then the kind of the third leg of high level strategy is really kind of open banking, or I'd say open API integration, ease, that sort of thing. CSI actually had invested a fair amount in that, but
Yep.
frankly, we're a kind of humble company, which I like. And so we hadn't really kind of articulated to the market, to our clients, how much was there.
Mhm.
We built a developer portal so that fintechs and banks that have the IT staff can do a lot of that themselves. So we're going to continue to invest there. I mean, we know we're not going to be all things to our clients. So to your point on fintechs, in situations you know, where you can't necessarily build build that capability, at least partner with them so you can benefit, get it to your customers, perhaps get some revenue generation. So those are, there's a lot of other things in the company we're investing in, from fraud and AI and
Mhm.
payments, but kind of those are three big pillars that all of our clients have pretty much said, yeah, especially the commercial stuff, as you mentioned, in small business. That's so important to their business.
Yep.
As a bank goes in and starts focusing on their strategy and their innovation, it's extremely important to find that technology partner. And I like how you use that. The partnership that's going to allow both of us to grow, the both of us to go market to different audiences. And I think that's extremely important in the banking's decision-making process. And you guys have done a good job of getting there.
Appreciate
That's a hard
that.
balance.
Appreciate that. I mean, we got work to do. I'm never one to say we're there, we're great, we got work to do, but our clients, I think, are aligned and I think they feel good about where we're headed. And now we just got to execute for them.
Yeah.
And it's imperative, right? A lot of the community banks don't have the tech staff to do this stuff
Mhm.
themselves. They're relying on us. We're their key partner, and we've got to deliver on it.
I love Nancy. I actually got some recent numbers that we're getting out the door on you guys and talk a little bit about where you're at, which is kind of incredible. So, often we look by, I'll say make and model, right? So, like, do we look at the landscape as the brands? And I mean, the large core folks, Fiserv and FIS with tons and tons of products. But when you get down into product focus, especially for Matthew and I, we have so many of these conversations with banks that there's probably five or six cores that are really actively, I mean, that's kind of the show, that's being
Yep.
sold. And also, I think that tracks into being invested in and some of the other things you're talking about. And so CSI New Point is now in the number two spot with 10.1%. That's a heck of a milestone. I'm pretty sure that's only, if that's not the second time, it's maybe the third time that anybody's ever
Yep.
reached 10%. I mean, we all remember, Premier getting way up there some years ago, and that's at the speed of
Yeah.
conversions. Once you get into a powerful position, you've really got some strength, right? And so I love if you talk
Yep.
about a little bit of that, and also I doubt you're wanting to announce numbers, but I've been looking in at some of those numbers, and you're doing great, like incredibly shockingly great on the sales side the last year or so.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate that, Tanner. I mean, I think, and I appreciate the analysis you guys did. I think, for us, it just solidifies to your point. I think sometimes the conversation is only about three players out there. And obviously we've grown a lot. We've got a lot of clients that are using a lot of different things with us. Some of that may go to, again, we've been a pretty humble company. We don't necessarily kind of go out in the market, pounding our chest, but it was good to get, kind of your validation. And we knew we were growing, to your point, quite a bit every year in terms of new clients. Frankly, we've got a lot of clients that started as de novos and are now $3-4 billion banks, right? And that's probably something we're the most proud of because we were their partner and kind of helped them get there, whether it was organically or through M&A. But yeah, I mean, I think we've been winning well. Some of that's about our relationship and services, and kind of to the earlier conversation, I think more and more is about, we do have an open, flexible approach, and we are investing a lot in, what we know community banks need to differentiate, and that's our mission in life. Kind of to the opening comment, like it's a difficult competitive market, and it's our job to help them get there. And I just, I think it resonates that we're a partner in that regard.
I strangely enough actually feel that, there's a kind of a group. I think we really saw it with Michelle at the roundup, with some of the other cores doing a panel. And there's like a, community bank core group of folks that are just really different from the other side of the world. And I know, hey, if the bigger you are, the bigger the target. So I'm not trying to throw darts at the big guys, but it's really interesting to see sort of the community banking ethos or sentiment that, has certainly shifted, right? And I think you guys are firmly in the midst of that, and actually fairly friendly to folks that, are certainly competitive in lots of areas. But I think that's high level of service that we see from you guys and them. And I think throughout the organizations, people who really care, that has starting to become pretty black and white these days. Not to say that I think the folks that are struggling don't, they know that they're struggling as well. So I
Yeah.
think that puts you guys in a really good light.
Yeah.
Speaking of
Yeah.
that too,
Go
on
ahead.
New Point, talk about incredible, but what about the bank asset sizes? Like the banks that you're supporting seem to be getting bigger, which is
You bet.
absolutely incredible. I don't know
Yep.
that we saw that 5 years ago. Tara and I've been watching the numbers and talking to banks about that. Walk me through your strategy, supporting some of these larger banks with your small banks. How's all that work?
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, we definitely have had success moving up market. We have de novos up to 20 billion plus asset size banks, right? And for us, again, kind of, we look at it as, not just tied to kind of the service we provide. I think that's super important, as we talked about. But I think they see that we are investing, we've got technologies that fit their needs. Now, some of the stuff we talked about with commercial and some of that's really driven by, the larger client needs, but we also, small banks that are pretty sophisticated in the commercial side. So I think that's resonated well. And really, I think, this has been going on probably for a few years that we've been, winning in the larger billion plus market. And then, as I said, we've also supported a lot of banks that started well below that, that grew organically, or they're doing a lot of M&A. One of the things um, that we're looking to do within Linda Fisher's world, our COO, we brought in a new person on kind of all of implementations, but also professional services, because a lot of those banks are going to get pretty acquisitive, and they want help in that regard, right? They only have so much staff themselves. So I think it's a lot about kind of, it all goes back to kind of understanding the clients and listening and responding to kind of where they're going and what do they need. And I just think that's helped us certainly move up market and retain clients that are growing and all of that.
It feels to me, guys, like 26. We may see it in 25. It may be a record-breaking year for, I'll say, core churn, keeping in mind that that means sales and, organic wins as well as M&A to me, right? And I typically you're going to see more, sometimes considerably more conversions come from M&A, right? And it's a lot of times it's 2 to 1. So, we might
Yep.
see 150 core sales and maybe, we could see 250 on the M&A side. I think those would probably be my guess. If I had to guess at 26, I'd say 150, you might even see 200 core deals get done and maybe 250 on the acquisition side. Uh, Nancy, you're gonna laugh at me, but stuck in my brain is 2% churn in core, right? Forever. That's kind of what it's looked like. And I mean, we could see like 4 or 5. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
really crazy time. So you feel like that's got to be a good opportunity. Is there any fear and risk there? How do you feel about the acquisition cycle? And you're obviously much on the healthier side of that than some of the others are, but what's
Yep.
your kind of thesis on all that?
Yeah, I do. I would agree. I think next year, and I look at it as an opportunity, just given where we're at. Not naive to there's good competitors out there, and we've got to continue to raise our own bar. But I think combination of, as we all know, one of the big players made some big announcements, and I think that that's obviously already starting to kind of put more jump balls out there, if you will. And then the other is what you mentioned on M&A. Most of our clients above $1 billion are absolutely looking at acquiring. And so the challenge part of that is probably below the billion, which are a very important part of our client base. There'll be continued consolidation. So it's an opportunity for us to help both the acquiring as well as the acquired institution kind of get to a good place. But I think, yeah, I think next year will be, just given all of that, probably higher numbers than we've seen in terms of core changes. And I think CSI is, well positioned there.
Yeah. One other one, Nancy and Matthew, I'd kind of love to get your thoughts here too, man. Just it's a big ball of wax right now I mean, thinking back to the last decade, guys, when it was challengers and fintechs, and now I think we're all fintechs or the vocab's a mess. Open banking, banking as a service, embedded finance. And I mean, I am starting to get more and more in the headspace that we're just going to be, this is just technology and banking, right? It's all really coming
Yep.
together because it's starting to, and I think this is a good thing as we see these different areas or networks, kind of like we're seeing with crypto and stablecoin and everything else, they're all trying to build ramps to each other. And now, as it gets more and more connected, it's all kind of becoming one big thing. So I just wanted to get your view, Nancy, on that whole side of the world that you talked a little bit about some of the API strategy and that side for you guys. It's a questionable area, right? I see the most profitable institutions that I've ever seen leading into that. You also see folks that take some risks, don't have their ducks in a row that get into some trouble. Although that's
Yep.
given us an interesting roadmap for how to do things right. But from a core perspective, how do you participate and support all that, and what's that strategy look like?
Yeah, it's one of the things I talked to the clients about. We spent a fair amount of time last week on, I think, and within Michelle's world, so he has strategy, but he also has partnerships with Steve DePardoni, has Tara, with all the analysts and consulting relationships. That partnership piece, the conversation that we have with clients is we want to make sure we're collaborating with them on what are the ones they really feel are the most impactful for them, where A, they can benefit from the technology, but B, also perhaps get, revenue benefit and that sort of thing. And so we're going through some prioritization on that, to be honest, and making sure we're not just partnering, one-offs, and it's really tied to what the clients want. And I think that's going to be an important thing, that we pick the right ones that satisfy, what their needs are. And then the other side of it is kind of what you talked about, banking as a service. We have some of our banks that are doing that. And so giving them the technology to enable that so they can have another growth avenue. And I do believe, a lot of the fintechs, they just don't have the regulatory risk, fraud, compliance kind of hardening that the banks can give them. And so helping the banks kind of be very competitive in
Mhm.
terms of offering that service, to your point, it becomes all a banking technology play or platform. So that's kind of how we're viewing it. Some of the investments we're making will beef up kind of that banking as a service capability, that they need to be highly competitive. And so it's definitely a focus of ours.
That's
Nancy,
great. Matthew, that's where my head was.
yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you guys, I like where you're headed, right? You're building out three things, right? Obviously, you've got the traditional banks, right? Banks want to be traditional. You're there, you're solid, your numbers are showing it. You're number two at New Point. You're also getting ready with Aperture to go help these banks go after treasury customers, which is the lifeblood of the banks, right? They can handle all the treasury services with account analysis to go get those extra that income that they
Yep.
might be missing out on. And then number three, with your developer portal, with everything that you're looking, is if these banks want to become innovative, which Tanner and I are seeing the most profitable banks in the US had, you're positioning yourself to be able to support that. Once again, that strategic partner. It sounds like you're hitting on all three of those things that a bank needs.
Yeah, I think so. I do. I appreciate you saying that. I do. And on the kind of open or the API piece, one of the things we're doing as well is looking at should we have a base of resource that can help them do that integration? Because some of the banks have that staff, as I said, and some don't. And so being a little more proactive on, hey, you want to integrate this third party. We're not just going to give you this stuff in the portal. Here's some additional help we can give you. I think that's going to be important because I think a lot of our clients just don't have that technology capability. And so we've got to kind of give that to them, not just the framework and the tech, but assist them in, integrating the third parties that are really critical to them.
I think that's incredibly smart. Both banks I worked at, oddly enough, we had our own in-house development team. And I still would kind of look to you guys going, hey, kind of help me out, right? Like I've been a banker forever. I understand banking, I understand compliance, understand regulation, but maybe this is my first time on an API, right? And I think you guys be able to provide that guidance and best
Yep.
practices and how to go do this is
Yep.
extreme.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think, culturally we've shifted, like some of the cores. I mean, we probably were a little guilty of, hey, we're going to push our product that's comparable and we're going to close, be more closed. That's not, what we want to do. We want to have a culture where like if they want somebody else and it's the right fit for them, then let's make it easy for them to do the integration. It's their data, it's not our data. So just culturally, we've shifted there a fair amount, and some of that's still a little bit of work in progress, to be honest. But I think we're getting there and pretty excited about it, and the clients are excited about it.
Yeah, one of the things, kind of big picture for me, Nancy, just looking at all these different areas of the market and thinking a lot about that fintech space. Also, I got a big eye right now towards private credit. I'm actually fairly worried about that. I think there's doing a
Oh,
little
yeah,
analysis on some institutional exposure there that I think we all need a little better eye on. But competitively, it's just as scary, right? And so as you kind of think through that, look at all the investment, especially from the VC world and the PE world that goes into the kind of anti-bank space, right? And they don't have to be profitable. That's a lot for an institution to compete with. And I think for a bank, they're looking to you guys to help compete there, right? And kind of help drive that direction. And so as you look at
yeah,
all of the providers out there, there's so much dollars that needs to be spent on, we'll just say innovation. It's a lot to manage. And then what we end up doing is, especially at the cores, kind of building these bundles where everything gets trapped inside and doesn't work outside. And I know I'll use the term core-agnostic for lack of a better, but I've heard a lot of that from different folks at CSI, kind of this thesis, and especially through, I'm thinking about Hawthorne River, Aperture, other acquisitions you guys have done sort of this idea of it doesn't have to just be locked inside of CSI core users. We could have best of
yep,
breed things that maybe go to other banks, other institutions, et cetera. I
yep.
just wanted to hear from you. I'm sure that there's a brilliant strategy behind there, and I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, we just reorganized the company a few weeks ago around that whole topic. So we have a core division which is led by Gio Mastronani, who you guys probably know, been with CSI a long time. Actually, have a new product head, Pankaj Sarda there. Everything core, payments, doc solutions, the financial crime, all of that's there. And then we stood up what we call digital engagement solutions, which is Aperture, CSI Digital, Hawthorne River, and Velocity. That's
Mhm.
led by Chris Cox it was leader on the Aperture side and Daniel Hazley's product side. And bringing those together, to your point, all of those solutions integrate with multiple cores. They have banks all the way up to, they can go up to 200 billion in assets. They probably have the largest, probably 70 billion. There's some credit unions in there. And those are best of breed products, to your point, that we are going to continue to invest in. But part of that investment is deeper integration to the core, so our CSI cores can benefit, but continued investment in other cores. Because I think, the more we can add best of breed products that fit, multiple cores and markets, it's going to benefit the core clients. And so we've definitely seen the benefit of kind of that, but we won't lose sight of just the integration, to the CSI core, because we have the ability, obviously, to do that with NewPoint. So yeah, it's definitely a strategy. And I would tell you, in the core side, we think our market is de novo up to, call it, 25 billion in asset community banks. Very focused on that. And then in that kind of digital solutions, digital engagement, like I said, we have credit unions, we have de novo again, all the way up to, 60, 70 billion in assets. And they're just best of breed products that, all clients can benefit from. So you're right. I mean, it's an investment in both integration to CSI, but just keeping those investments going so that they can stand alone and they can be best of breed in the market.
I think it's a great strategy and a good thing. I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say, Nancy, is to me, it's like an honorable or ethical thing that we all should be open to of let's choose our sandbox and play well in it and not look at somebody as competitive just because we're serving the same
Yep.
market. They're gonna have
Yep.
different parts and pieces, but I think banks and the rest of us, the vendor partner crowd, we've all been a little isolationist and building our little our little forts for a little bit too long. And I really watch the fintech side of the world, and they really help each other. And they don't have the tools that we have yet. They're highly competitive with us, and I think it's just being a little more. They let their walls down, and they're a little more open. Knowledge sharing. They don't get too worked up about certain products. They have the things that they focus on, and I
Yep.
think that's what I'm hearing. It's a good thing. I'm excited about it.
I'm excited to it. That is a lot of, and look, we have multiple user groups. And like I said, we brought a number of clients together last week under that same context of, like, let's work together, make sure, there's some consistency in the big rocks that you need from us. And it brings them together more as a network. Like they're going to have their own meetings. You know what I mean? To your point, they've got to get more, kind of open and collaborative together. And I think they all want to, but it's our job to kind of bring them together and help them put a forum together to do that. And then for us to have, transparent communications with them and input from them. So big believer in that as well.
That's
You know,
great.
Tanner and I've talked many a times, and it's exciting, right? Where you guys are headed. I love the culture, love the staff. The community banks are excited to go to your conferences, which is a fun thing to do.
You
You
guys are
got a
coming,
lot of,
right? CX, you're
I
coming to
mean,
see.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
remember as a banker walking into a conference thinking, oh man, I don't know what's going to happen. I walk into your conference, everybody's like high fiving each other. I'm like, this is a cool
Mm.
place to be, right?
Mhm.
So I guess my question becomes, what's next, right? I mean, you've made some great acquisitions, you've got great teams, you're doing really cool stuff. I can't wait to hear what's next on your list.
Yeah, I think for us, it is kind of like I said, we did some restructuring, and a lot of the key leaders, all the day-to-day relationships remain the same, but we've kind of rolled that out and just executing on that so we serve our customers the best we can. But the big ones are kind of what we talked about, but all the commercial pieces, whether we buy, partner, take equity stake, build it, those are kind of in motion, and they'll take some time. Some of that stuff is our kind of large kind of capabilities we need to deliver clients, but we'll do it incrementally, and in some cases, acquire. And then it is the data AI side is a big focus for us, as it should be for everybody. Aperture actually we were doing a fair amount, but Aperture was doing quite a bit. And so kind of consolidating more or less our kind of data across the entire kind of CSI footprint, wrapping all the right governance around it, getting it all in one place, and then being able to deliver, much richer AI experiences and predictive analytics. That's a big focus. We're already doing quite a bit, to be honest, in AI, both internally and in some of the products and some of the end user stuff, but there's just a lot to be done there. And so I'd say the two biggest things are for us commercial, kind of rounding that out, and that whole piece of kind of data and AI that you'll see us, making plays again, whether it's building, buy-in, or partner, it's going to be a mix of all of the above.
Awesome. Well, I gotta tell you, Nancy, I really enjoyed it. we crammed a heck of a lot into a short period of time, and I just want to say thank you for joining us, and I just will continue to watch, and we're excited for you guys, and actually, Matthew and I are very appreciative of all the good things you guys are doing for Community Bank. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, and thank you guys for what you do. I really appreciate it. I think the community banking community loves what you guys do because you're just advocates, and I love it and appreciate all the interaction and input you give to us as well.
You bet. We'll see you next time.
All right, see you guys. Take care.
See ya.
Bye bye.